Presenting from across the pond, it's the Squared Circle Relics Podcast.
Welcome along to another SCR session here. This is Jamie Stocker bringing you another one-to-one session with someone around a particular topic. Of course, we've done home video last time round, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Tony, the wrestling store guy in Phoenix, WrestlingTradingCards.com, and formerly Vela Cards. Tony, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing great, Jamie. Thanks for having me on today.
No, it's been great to have you here on the show actually today. I know obviously we've gone back and forth and done shows together on your own channel and things like that, but it'd be nice to bring you on to go and do an SCR session. We're going to get into Raw Deal today. I know people sort of, not have a bit of a laugh with me on the podcast around Raw Deal, but I do love Raw Deal and the images that we've had over the years. And we're coming up to sort of 25 years since the kind of first sets came out. So it'll be good to dive into a bit of Raw Deal. And I know obviously this is a piece in your heart, really, Raw Deal. So before we get into kind of some things around Raw Deal, just give the listeners a quick intro into yourself and I'll see how Raw Deal links in with you as well a bit, really.
Well, as you've already said, basically most people are going to know me because of WrestlingTradingCards.com. So, we archive every wrestling card made from the 1800s to current. And, a little behind right now, but we'll get back up there again. And, I'm a longtime seller and collector of wrestling cards. And to tie it into the Raw Deal, I didn't get into Raw Deal when it first premiered. I didn't get into Raw Deal until the Vengeance release. And I was looking for things to expand my business at the time for trading cards. And I decided to get into this thing called WWE Raw Deal. Knowing nothing about it, I knew it was a game. And I've never played games before. I've never done Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon kind of thing. So I didn't know how to play it. But I got into it and I quickly fell in love with it. That's for sure.
And again, it's one of these things that during that time period as well, we'll get into kind of the licensing side of things because it's very interesting how this kind of was separate from other trading card stuff. But the premise in itself was obviously a bit like your other TCG kind of stuff. You had your superstar booster sets and your starter decks, and then you would build up that superstar repertoire, then do the card game as you would as normally, really, wouldn't you?
Correct, yeah. So, like most games, I guess, again, I'm talking to someone who didn't play any of those other games, but you can get starter decks. And that's pretty much enough to get you just to start playing the game. And then to strengthen your decks, you could buy booster packs and get more power type cards like that to, strengthen your deck, looking for trademark finishers and things like that. And, we'll get into, I'm sure, talking about probably prize support cards and how those would, help bolster up your deck. And the game just continued to keep expanding and evolving over, it lasted in print for 7 years, from 2000 to 2007, which, in the grand scheme of card games, my understanding, that's a pretty long time for a CCG to last, because some just come and go. Not everything gets to be Magic. Not everything gets to be Pokemon and live forever, basically. But that was a good run, for a CCG. And when it, finally went away, I was a little bummed because I was one of the few that was liking the direction that it was going by going from the traditional classic stuff into the Revolution format. And I liked the Revolution format. It enabled someone like me who didn't get into the game until many releases into it to kind of start from the beginning something fresh and scratch. And I liked the way it worked. And I had already a good basic knowledge of the classic game and how it worked, and I can apply that to the new one. And it was just it moved at a much faster pace because the game was getting long and drawn out, and I liked what Revolution was doing. But Raw Deal is fun. I still have a little bit laying around. I don't have what I used to. I used to have a lot, and I was one of the biggest sellers on the planet that sold Raw Deal for many, many years.
I mean, when all the things ended, you said it was that 7-year period there. So we started off with those 6 starter decks, and it went on from there. How many superstars do you think we had in Raw Deal in the end? Do you think we had 3 figures by that point, by the end of that 7-year period?
3 figures, over 100 characters? Ooh, I'd have to go look at WTC and actually do my homework on that. But, if you're averaging, you have to think, not just starter decks, but they also would have booster superstars too.
Yep.
So, Road Dogg didn't have a starter deck. Billy Gunn didn't have a starter deck. Those were booster superstars, X-Pac, things like that. And they did that throughout the releases. I got to say it's somewhere in that 100 range. It's got to be at least, I would think so.
And it really covers, obviously, a really good period of wrestling. Obviously, you got your Attitude Era, your Ruthless Aggression. You kind of then work through that entire period. And you said there, obviously, they were changing the style of the game as the years went by. But ultimately, they're all interchangeable. So if you picked up a starter deck of The Rock from Series 1, you could still be playing it in 2005 with someone like Luther Reigns or something, couldn't you, ultimately?
Yeah, if Luther ever got an actual deck. But
Yeah. I was trying to think of some SmackDown mid-card. But
you know
someone
what?
totally random, you know?
It's funny you say that because I think Luther Reigns was. There's some guys in the raw deal community that are way more knowledgeable. I'm more on the sales side, and then and I think I have a decent amount of knowledge on it, but not like some of these guys. They know every intricate detail. But I believe I had to look at my sales sheets that I have. I think Luther Reigns was actually scheduled to actually have a deck, and they changed him to turn into somebody else because he was in and out so quickly. But they did that a lot. Like there was a lot of superstars that were slated for release, and they would change it for whatever reasons, But yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be very competitive, obviously with a Rock deck coming into 2005 and playing something from 2005. But essentially, you can get in, and the formatting they had would be like a regular straight classic, where that's how you just play straight classic. Then they had the format that I always dreaded, which was called All Access, and I really hated All Access because that pretty much was anything and everything goes. Doesn't matter what release it came from or what cards it was all access, baby. And then as we got into 2006 and then 2007, where we had Revolution, there was also the Revolution format. And they had different formats throughout. Like, I think in Magic and in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, they'll have like certain releases are cut off. You can't pack any cards that were from that point. And they try to do that with Raw Deal, where it had like an Afterburn and stuff like that, where, things that these cards from this release backwards can't be used, but only these certain cards can be used going forward. And so it was a weird deck structures at those times like that. And I said it evolved to things where we had standard, then we got into things like chain, heat, and volley, and then we got into all kinds of different types of mechanics.
And when it comes to obviously doing, people playing the games, how do you think it was perceived amongst kind of collectors and gamers? Did they enjoy playing the game? Were they thinking there were things that could be done better, or was that kind of listened to throughout the years? And what's the kind of feedback through competitions and stuff?
Well, there was a lot of feedback throughout competitions, both about the game itself and how like prize distribution was handed out. That became a thing. And what I mean by that is like, you had really good players who were like, because they would have world championships where, Comic Images, the license company, would hold these world championships where you get a trip to the WrestleMania. You win a trip to WrestleMania, all this. People who were really good at the game are only the ones that could win the good prizes. So the people who were like below that, who could never win tournaments, never got the good stuff to make their decks better, kind of thing. So it was a weird. So people complained about that, but the evolution of tournaments was always brought you the feedback that you wanted. So anytime there was a drastic change in the game, there was always somebody who complained about it. It's like, I don't like this chain format. It sucks, man. Oh, the heat format sucks, man. I mean, people bitched and complained from the beginning when they first introduced a Backlash deck.
Yeah.
So when the game started, it was just straight a deck, get boosters to build your deck up, and that was it. There was no pre-match phase going around to kind of mimic the things that go on behind the scenes before a match takes place. And when that came out, I was like, oh, that's just... I liked it when it was, really just when it was just the deck itself and no backlash kind of thing, no mid-match cards, no backlash deck of any kind. But when people would come to these, card shops and see that there was raw deal tournaments going on, it's usually people who played Pokemon, Magic, or whatever they're playing, versus whatever they're playing. Yeah, well, they would come in. Either they were people who were already players and they're playing, and now the tournament's going on, and now you see people coming in for their Pokemon tournament going, oh, there's a wrestling card game? Really? Oh, that's kind of cool. How do you play? And then wrestling was so hot, everything was going, wrestling-wise. So people loved it.
What do you think to people now? If people want to try and like pick up Raw Deal now, do you think there would still be a market for people to pick up for the very first time? Or do you think there's more a nostalgia thing here? People will find their Raw Deals and then decide to have a tournament or something?
I think it's more nostalgic at this point. even when it went into the virtual format, which I'm sure you'll want to know more about virtual stuff.
Yeah.
When it went to virtual, it's existed in virtual format longer than it ever was in print.
Really?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it lasted from 2000 to 2007 in print format, and then it went in late 2008, early 2009 to date to now. It's been in virtual.
Oh, there you go.
Uh,
Exactly. So there's still people
yeah.
out there then.
So there's still a committee of people out there, usually on the Team Canada Online website is usually like the home for all raw deal stuff. There's a great group of guys that continues to keep, shifting in and out, of rules, and the game has evolved and changed. And because it's virtual, you can change things on the fly no matter what now. So,
Yeah.
and people are free to print out their own cards on paper, whatever they want to do, kind of thing. And it's a fine line, slippery slope. We can talk about that if you want. But
Yeah. 100%, yeah.
the game has completely evolved like that. But yeah, I don't recall even the virtual. We tried to recruit people to come in and play, and I don't recall that many new players coming in. It was usually bringing people who are like, "Oh, you guys are still playing that game? Oh, it's in virtual format now. I can play as Bret Hart. I can play as such and such. I can play as a current player, superstar." So guys who hadn't played since the printing days have been like, "Oh, I want to come back and play this game now."
Yeah. And I think that's it. And we'll get into kind of that virtual scene as we go through the interview. I just want to go back a little bit into kind of the sort of beginning really of the raw deals. Obviously, it's obviously Comic Images obviously had the license for that entire 7-year period. And I know the licenses were separate from sort of the game versus trading cards. Obviously, Comic Images lost that license to Flair, latter part of the year 2000. Why is it that they get out to keep Raw Deal going that long and keep it separate? And, was there any change to obviously can that sooner? And what was kind of that relationship there with Comic Images and the WWF at that point?
Well, if you to plug my own show, I did interview Alan Gordon, the president and CEO of Comic Images. So you can go check it out on the WTC channel on YouTube. There wasn't. The licensings were two separate things. One is, and that's the thing that's always been that way. So there's always your traditional trading card license, and you also have your either digital slash TCG, CCG type license like that. So they're treated as two separate things. And Comic Images had both licenses, both for the CCG aspect of it and the trading card aspect of it. And it's not that they lost their license to Fleer; it just wasn't getting renewed by WWF at the time.
Right.
They didn't want to renew it. So then in comes Flair to take that over. But the gaming license was different, and there were talks about it when even talking back in the day when Baron was still alive, the co-creator of the game, that they had to push hard to keep it as a thing. And that was like why Revolution was kind of created in a sense, was to try to give it a refresh, reboot, to maybe attract new players, because the player base was kind of fading out. Now, that could be attributed to many different things. I've had podcasts talking about Raw Deal as well, from some of the guys back in the day who were, part of the rules committee, who actually were, the final say in how rules, went down and things like that. People say, oh, well, the Survivor Series packages, when those came out, became like the best of the previous releases, became the demise of the game. Like, why should I go back and buy the old stuff when I could just get the new stuff? And like, they changed things. SS3 changed everything. Survivor Series 3 changed everything. Overpowering decks like Honor the Giant or Mr. Kennedy or Mr. Pay-Per-View or, Eugene. Those were like really super powerful decks.
Yeah.
So they were always kind of hanging by a thread, as it was. And the player base was going smaller and smaller and smaller. And the Revolution format was a last-ditch effort, and it didn't work out and went away. But it was just different on how they kept the license, obviously, because there's just two different things like that. And they didn't mind printing out that stuff, according to Alan. They didn't mind putting it out. They themselves were not overly huge fans because they don't understand the structure of the game. This was a love project with Mike Foley and Baron, that were the creators of the game. And, they had a lot of influence in that, especially with Mike Foley also being employed by WWE as well. He had that relationship there. And then, Baron being one of the biggest, wrestling fans you could ever think of, and then getting a game that he helped create off the ground. And And there's been talk over the years, like these guys, like, man, if I win the lottery, I'd bring that game back, kind of thing. It's like people don't understand the dynamics of all the. It's not just the license you have to get with WWE, especially now if you wanted to bring back Raw Deal. You'd have to go to Mike because he's the surviving co-creator. Licensing out the mechanics and the engine that drives the game from him, because it's a very specific, unique engine of how the game's played. Yeah. In addition to getting that licensing right from WWE, in addition to getting licensing rights, for anything else that has to do with all the different things that are not owned by one company but by another. Yeah. And so there's a lot of hurdles to go through. It's just not going to happen. I remember a few years back, just before the pandemic, people were trying to get Xavier Woods on board and getting on social media.
I was going to say, Xavier Woods is tried, exactly, yeah. And you can't get a bigger platform than that on YouTube to try and restart something,
You get a guy like that, and he can't get the game off the ground, even if he was even half serious about it or not. I ran into Xavier Woods at Dragon Con in Atlanta one year. I saw him there cosplaying as a caveman, and I walked up to him and I said, hey, nice to meet you. My name is Tony Vela. And he stopped me. He goes, Vela? Why do I know that name, Vela? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know this guy. He doesn't know me. And I go, so I thought, oh, he's a gamer. I go, play Raw Deal? Do you ever do Vela cards? He goes, Vela cards. I've bought things from you off that site before. And he's like, I'm trying to build my Triple H deck. I need a pedigree card to finish the deck. I said, I got you covered, dude. Don't worry.
Let me know.
I said, you are in the game now in a virtual form. He goes, really? I said, I'll print you out a complete master, all foil set for you. It's like that. I sent him one.
Nice.
But people still love the game. I mean, and they remember it, and they still love the game. That's all I can go on about that.
No, so talk about obviously those images and stuff like that. Like kind of your favorite images and favorite sets. I mean, what's your favorite sets that you've kind of used and played with, and favorite images that you've seen throughout the years as well?
I like the later years of them. Well, one of the complaints about Raw Deal over the years was that things became more got wordy, a little too wordy. So you had certain cards that the font size got small because there was just so much text on it that's what slows the game down. Is all this pre-match stuff going on, like having a venue, having, stipulations, having, objects, having events, all these things. I mean, sometimes a pre-match event could last a half an hour all by itself before the game even started. And so that became kind of a complaint. But the later years, well, people sometimes didn't like the wording, did provide some cool images, I think, and some cool gameplay. So I kind of like that whole Unforgiven, Great American Bash releases, those last couple releases that came out. I loved them because they would do things called throwback cards. So they would take cards that probably worked in the very beginning when Raw Deal first started, like a kick, a regular kick. They gave a throwback version of it where they made it a little bit, made it better. And at the same time, making things better, they would update images sometimes too. So there's a lot of cool images in Raw Deal. Trying to specifically think if there's anything that jumps in my mind that I really like. Just some of the actual, and this is contradictory to what I usually like in trading cards. I'm not a big fan of action cards in trading cards. I like more pose stuff. Whereas in Raw Deal, because of the cards themselves, I kind of like the action shots more because I'm not really, it's part of the game. Like if I'm going to do a double underhook suplex like that, boom, I'm going to play the, I want to see a picture of it, Yeah. But there's a lot of cool stuff in there in that sense. And I think in the early years, what I missed in the later years, in the early years, I like the little quotes sometimes in the bottom where they have like King Lawler or JR.
JR.
Yeah, some kind of quote from an event like that was always kind of fun.
Yeah, I do. I must admit, those early year images for me, and I'll get into a bit more kind of like some of my favorite images here as well. But some of those shots, obviously, they just look really cool images. And I know people like we're talking about photogenic this year as a penny set, and somebody, these are really cool shots. Mm-hmm. If you go through those Raw Deal sets, I mean, any of those could easily be on a photogenic set.
100%.
Like Kane getting shot in the face with like the firework gun, or some of these early shots of the Undertaker or like the Rock with the fire, like there's some really nice images on there, and you think they would look real nice on a trading card these days.
Yeah, and they had stuff like even from the Armageddon release like that. They had Armageddon is Upon Us, which is a great card. There's some even just very, I don't know, nostalgically type shots in Raw Deal. Like, the Undertaker has a really good ultra rare called The Urn. And it's just a picture of the urn with all this mist around it. It's like that. It's like really cool looking. Yeah. But you're right. Those things could look really nice in the photogenic release like that. A lot of those Raw Deal ones. Funny things about some of the early, like the first two releases, Premiere and Backlash, are fully loaded, is a lot of, and even before that, they put out a promo set of the very first Raw Deal. It's called the WrestleMania promo set, and they had square, not a rounded corner, but square points.
Yeah.
There was a Stone Cold deck and a Rock deck. Those are very rare to come, hard to come by. But they would oftentimes use the same picture for a move. So a kick would just be like a kick, and then you have like an arm drag, and it's a picture of the kick. And then you have like, you'd have like a suplex, it's a picture of the kick.
Yeah.
And when the first release came out, you would have moves would oftentimes feature Taz and Steve Blackman doing a photo shoot in the ring to support that moveset. So there would be like a chokehold, and it'd show like Taz chokeholding Steve Blackman, or there'd be like a chicken wing, and it would show that would show Bob Backlund, and then it would show like different moves, and you can tell it's all from the same photo shoot. There's no crowd; it's just these two guys in the ring.
Yeah, because I don't know if I heard it on one of your other podcasts or something, but that you said that they staged some shots. Obviously, they couldn't find a good image. They would do it on an empty thing before the show started. Correct. Or something.
Yep. So, and that's a fun thing that I see the virtual guys doing, because the virtual guys, they have no limits. So they get to go out and look for the highest quality image of certain things. Like for years and years and years, people were looking for a specific move for Mankind. I can't remember what it was. One of his trademark finishers, there was no clear image of it, even from a DVD capture.
Diving elbow or something like that.
Something like that. And then even when they brought in Owen Hart into the game, they made a Blue Blazer promo, and they made an Owen Hart set in the virtual. They could not find a clear image of a trademark finisher for him. So it's some of those things are still challenges to this day. But these guys can go in and make some great images that depict moments and stuff like that. I mean, these guys are guys. And so like there's a card in the Raw Deal called Puppies.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
And there's going to be hundreds of great pictures for that.
Yeah. I mean, we had the same conversation on the podcast, Raw Deal. There's a lot of boob shots in Raw Deal. They seem to love any boob shots,
Yeah. I mean, you're right, 100%. But that's also, it depicts that era. Like you said in the beginning,
yeah, of course,
you have the Attitude Era, and even Ruthless Aggression was a little ruthless. There were always a lot of gratuitous booby shots.
Yeah, exactly. But you saw obviously some of the other cards where we mentioned about some sort of rare and sought after cards as well. And even in the booster packs, like there was always that chase of some really hard ones. You mentioned obviously superstar cards, but there's some actually really rare cards in these booster ones that have a pretty high price to them even to this day. Yeah,
I mean, most of them are superstar specific. Obviously, you'll get a card like an Armageddon is Upon Us. It has 9, 10 different superstar logos on them, so it could be played by all those people. So that becomes very, highly sought after. When Survivor Series 3 came out, which was the third, basically best of type of release, they threw in a lot of throwback versions of cards in there for superstar specifics. The two main ones in that I come up to my head are going to be the Rock's Patented Foot Stomp, SS3, became uber powerful. And in some regards, people will never going to get a right answer on this, but, did they short print that? Because it seems to be more difficult. Like you don't find them as often. That card and the first to tap out throwback version became a big card. And those fetch for wrestling game, fetch decent money. And even during the pandemic, some of those cards were inching close towards 4 figures.
Really, I know I've been looking for some of the early ones, like Tori Enters the Fray was one that was always a
Another
tough one
one,
for me to try and find, you know.
which
And
they
they were
they
expensive.
redid that card. They redid that card called Help Is on the Way.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, this is it. And but finding those ones, they're still quite tough, and they don't crop up on eBay much at all, you know.
Nope, they don't. And those were always the big money cards for when I had Vela cards running. Those were the big money cards that oftentimes would get picked off first. And
Yeah,
it seemed like it didn't matter if I would raise the price on it incrementally $5 at a time. They just kept getting bought. Like it never was. It didn't seem to be a ceiling. It just kept getting bought.
yeah,
Um, that's just for booster type stuff. Then you get into the prize support stuff, and that stuff became pricey as well. But booster cards, even non-foil, non-ultra rare cards, started going up in value because you had
yeah,
things like in the Unforgiven release, Great American Bash release. I think the Royal Rumble box also had some stuff in it as well, and I know I'm missing one somewhere in there, but they had I think Armageddon possibly. They had superstar specifics that were not unique, so you can pack multiples of them.
right,
And some of those had verbiage on it that says you may pack up to 4 copies of this card. You may pack up to 6 copies of this card. Like another Hellfire boot from Kane can pack 6 cards. You pack 6 of them.
yeah,
Flair's patented chop block. You can pack 4 of them. Because these are things, if you're not a player, what that means is that, certain superstars had themes to them too. So 4
yeah,
always became the theme for Ric Flair, 4 horsemen. So all his stuff was like cost 4 fortitude, could do 4 damage, and things were sort of bridged in 4s. You do this, you could draw 4 cards, discard 4 cards, do this, you get to make your opponent discard 4 cards, all these different things. 6 for King, because, 666, kind of thing. So,
6, yeah,
so they just had things like that. Benoit had certain ones, Angle had certain ones, Undertaker had certain ones. Some of them had 2 different ones, depending on if you want to be, I don't think it was cheater or fan favorite kind of thing. So some of those cards will command, $15, $20, $25. And
yeah.
they're not even foil ultra rares, which is it's pricey.
It's good, yeah. And I know the I mean, one of my favorite sets is the collector's team, which is 2-man Power Trip and the Brothers of Destruction. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, some of those cards in that set, they obviously can be used for Undertaker and Kane, but some of them,
Yep.
inflict a lot of damage, and you had to only get that in that tin. And you think that drives people even now to want to, if you need that card, then for your Undertaker deck, you have to still buy that tin, and they have
Which
a
is,
bit of a price on them,
yeah, and which is a great thing about the game because the game has so many different ways that you can play it. When you have a particular superstar who has a very open-based type of theme to him, you can choose. You know what? I'm going to go this direction with my deck. It's like, you know what? Again, getting into the specifics of the game, I'm going to be more of a control deck. So I'm going to have more cards that allow me to keep control. I'm going to be more of a sponge deck where I can absorb all this damage. So you can go different directions with your decks and how you want to do them. And how you do that depends on what kind of cards you want to put in, obviously. So, but yeah, 2-man Power Trip, I think my opinion on that, I don't find anything in that tin that's expensive. They did put out there's a tag team title card that came in that deck.
So
Yeah,
that's
that
right,
features, it has Edge and Christian with Kurt Angle on it, I think.
and that's right. That's the 3 with the belts, yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't command much at all. That last I checked. But there's nothing. I think more guys bought it because they like the tin.
Yeah, I mean, I like the images of Kane and Taker on it with a half mask. I think that's
Yeah.
both of them are both really nice cards, to be honest. I think just for the love of Raw Deal more, I think, really.
Because they would put
just- we're talking
they
about-
put those things out. They would put like tins out, and they put out these holiday editions. So you'd have your releases that would come out, where they put like 2 different types of releases, boosters and stuff like that, and starter decks. And then you'd have a holiday, release.
Yeah.
And that was, I think that was one of them, if I'm not mistaken. It was a holiday release, the 2-man Power
Was
Trip.
Holiday Race, that's right, yeah.
Lethal Library, which had the battle bag, and the McMahon families within that one. They had the Raw versus SmackDown, which Eric Bischoff had his own tin, and Stephanie McMahon had her own tin.
I think the WrestleMania 20. Yeah.
Yep. SummerSlam tin with all the divas on it.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's the thing. Like, if they can tie it in with something else, you're obviously going to get more people buying into it as well, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah.
And just about some of the obviously rarer things as well. Something that cropped up throughout the years with the backstage passes, obviously competition and tournament prizes, and obviously having those autographs that obviously didn't come in packs, but obviously they would get them signed for the tournaments and things like that. What do you think the market is for people going after them now? Do you think there's still people after those as the appeal or the authenticity of them? Kind of, what's your thoughts on those?
Not as much as they probably should. I think that's people are sleeping on those. Actually, they're in deep sleep on those. You had the prize support stuff, which we touched a little bit about, where those were not available in packs. They were not available in starter decks. They were only available in tournaments that you had to go and attend and play. And, everybody usually got something, but, the good stuff was for the grand prize winner, and they would go its way down, And they would have things like, the movie ones when all that WrestleMania 21. So you had like, Dirty Taker, based on all the skits.
Eddie and Booker T and stuff.
Yeah. Like Pulp Fiction, they had Pulp Mania.
That's it.
You had a bunch of different ones. And then they have title belt cards, and the title belt cards give you special perks and bonuses. And what they ended up also introducing in two different waves is, as you touched on, autograph cards. That these are on card. They're not stickers. They're on card signatures that were issued by Comic Images to tournament organizers to give away as prizes, and those were usually their top prizes. They did a backstage autograph, and it was called a signature, backstage signatures. And we did that in virtual as well, by the way, where we had a thing called a backstage autograph session. And about 90% of those autographs are the ones I obtained and gave away as prizes over the years during the virtual format. I've gotten everybody from Hall and Nash to CM Punk to China to Jericho, Kurt. I got all those people to sign cards to give away as tournament prizes.
Yeah.
But when Comic Image did, they had a great list of people. Now get this. You can find, and there's 100 of them out there, Eddie Guerrero signed backstage autograph card.
Yeah. Yeah.
On card.
Yeah.
And a lot of
nice
them will say,
auto as well.
well, he's always had a beautiful auto. He's always had a beautiful auto. And a lot of them you'll find will say Latino Heat.
Yeah.
You had Stacy Keibler. You had Kane, Mr. Kennedy, Hurricane. Well, at the time, Gregory Cena signed. Tori Wilson signed. Batista signed. Edge. These are all on card. Now, and even super ultra rare ones, only 10 of each exist. There's a Randy Orton and a Triple H backstage card. Again, all on card. And I think collectors out there don't either know these because they don't turn up very often, especially the Triple H and Randy Orton one. Now, I've held those cards in my hand and had them scanned, so that's why I have the images for them. But at one point in time, I owned every Raw Deal card ever in existence that was ever produced. At least one. I've had all of them. I've had every signature card, every title belt card. I've had every card in the game, everything. And I had paid someone to scan all those images, and then I had them watermarked. So for the longest time, it's not anymore because Vela Cards doesn't exist anymore, but for the longest time, if you Google searched a Raw Deal card, that whole page is just Vela Cards images with my watermark on it. Yeah. Because it was on my website, and that's where it pulled the information from. And I would oftentimes get guys who were selling Raw Deal cards. Hey, are you interested in selling your images to me? I'll give you some product for your images. I'm like, no, that's okay.
These are mine, yeah.
Yeah, but those tournament cards, especially those signature cards, there's a lot of card collectors out there who I don't think are aware of those. And they already command a lot of money within the Raw Deal community who are looking to just collect or even bolster up their deck for whatever reason, or are big fans of that particular superstar. But it's not unheard of to see an Eddie Guerrero autograph card from Raw Deal fetch you well over $1,000, $2,000, $3,000.
Yeah. And this is the thing, this is within that time period as well, where you weren't really having, I mean, Topps hadn't really come in with autographs of this time period at this point in time. I don't think Heritage had really kind of come along and those.
But Comic Images did do autographs.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I mean, like, of this modern era kind of stuff. I mean, like the Ruthless Aggression guys, like your Cenas, your Batistas, they weren't in the card set signing at this point in time. So these are going to be really early also and a full also for a lot of these guys as well, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, other than what makes like the Eddie Guerrero one so special, it's only one of two different autographs has official autographs of that were on card. The WCW one and Raw Deal.
Yeah, and let's move into a little bit of kind of the sort of collecting of them now as well. Obviously, people are trying to sort of grade some of these cards now. Obviously, they're a little bit harder to grade with the rounded edges. What's your thoughts on people sending raw deal offs for grading?
I sent some in.
No,
I had purchased a collection that had some Raw Deal stuff in it, and I'm like, wow, these were all Premier. I had an Undertaker, a Stone Cold, and a Rock. Two of each one, what we call them face cards or the superstar cards that shows you what your ability is and all that stuff on it. And I go, wow, these are in pristine condition. Like these are got to be. I still only pulled 8s on them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What makes Raw Deal hard, especially, is because one, they're thin, like gaming cards with a black border on it, so they chip. Especially the foils, they chip easily. So to get high grades is really hard to get a high grade on those. And a lot of times too, like in any other card line, I guess, they had a lot of things that were off-centered, where you had a piece of the previous card still attached to that card kind of thing, It's the rounded corners don't do any favors either. You see some graded cards out there, but nowhere near the level that you see traditional trading cards. I personally, I don't care what condition it is in. Those backstage autograph cards, I get them all slabbed. I would just get them all slabbed. Yeah. One, they don't impede on your deck construction at all in the way of gameplay because they sit in what's called your backstage area. So not really in your way anyways. It's just sitting there letting people know that I get this little perk ability added to it. I mean, I'm a plus one hand size or whatever it says I can have or whatever on there. But it's just pretty to look at too. Like how cool is it?
It's a brag to have it with you, Tony, as well. Yeah, exactly.
There's a little bragging rights. And I was like, I see your Nunzio autograph, and I'll raise you, an Eddie Guerrero. There's definitely some really cool stuff there. And if I would encourage people to go after some of those autograph cards, especially if you can find them from someone who doesn't know what they have. And are just selling them like, hey, there's an autograph set. Give me $25, give me $30, give me $40. Some of those cards, they go for good money, Yeah. They go for good money.
I said they're in low numbers as well, regardless of how many were signed across. Like they're still going to be a lot smaller than your normal print runs of any autos now.
The highest print run on those, and I have those numbers. The highest print run on those is going to be 250. That's the highest print run on it. And so as little as 10.
Yeah.
And so Triple H and Randy Orton are 10.
You mentioned Nunzio there. Nunzio still hasn't had a certified auto since that point in time. So if you're a fan of the FBI, like that's all you're going to have of him ultimately, aren't you? Say.
Yeah, there's like again, Stacy, Tori, Victoria, I think signed. Yeah, Victoria signed some.
Yeah,
there's just a lot of good names. I mean, there's a Big Show. He had some in there as well. There's a lot of great names in there, and some of them are first-time signers.
Yeah, exactly that. And I mean, I'm just, I'm quite aware we're getting quite close to obviously the time, Tony. I know you've got to get the store open up this morning. So then we might have to part virtual raw deal, although there's I want to get into that scene quite a bit because obviously the love for that there, maybe we can do another session around that. But just 100%. Really, quickly now, what's your thoughts on kind of, where we are at the moment with raw deal and kind of modern wrestling fans and collecting TCG? Obviously, AEW have tried to do their kind of versus system side of things, and Supercard is obviously doing mobile stuff. Do you still think there's a market for people if they happen to do a brand new raw deal? Do you think people would still get into it if it's the same mechanics or totally new mechanics, or if WWE had their own TCG and got away from raw deal? Well,
in order to do raw deal properly, you, like I said before, you have to go and speak and try to convince Mike Foley to sell it. And that's just my experience with him is that's not happening. So that's out the window. But to relaunch it under some kind of different kind of mechanic, yeah, it's absolutely can do that. I mean, to an extent, that's what Topps kind of did in a gaming format anyways by bringing Slam Attacks out. It's just a simple, it's a simple, basically playing war, basically is what it is, It's not really a game in that sense. It's just a very simple game that, anybody can play. But collectors have gravitated towards that, looking for first appearances. Again, I'm trying to stay away from the rookie talk, but Yeah, they're going after those first appearances or early cards of certain superstars. And gaming cards can be the same thing. They're still cards. We have that. We live in a world now where anything from paper cutouts in a magazine to stickers are now considered part of the card world and card market. So why not? Like, I mean, there's these gaming cards over in Russia and gaming cards in South America, and there's all
Yeah.
these different types of cards all over the globe, and some of them are games. But I think if marketed right, I think there's still a market for it. But on the flip side, I just think because we have so much digital aspect, with Top Slam, when that was around, like I would be so happy if now when Topps starts doing stuff next year, if they brought that app back. I had fun with it.
You'll be, yeah, and Lloydie on the pod, he loves Top Slam, and he can't wait for that to come back around if they.
I hope it does. I mean, I really hope it does. But it's tough for me to say that if even if marketed correctly, obviously you get some nostalgic feel to it. But are people willing to sit down and play that kind of game with each other in a public setting? Yeah, why not? I would think so. Yeah. I mean, it could be fun, especially if you have a company that's willing to put some money behind it by making some incentives, like having tournaments, and maybe that was a big incentive for Raw Deal, was like come in and win a tournament, a qualifying event, and you can go to Worlds and play in Worlds, and you can win 2 tickets to WrestleMania.
Yeah.
That was a big deal, and if that was something that WWE and whatever company would have the license to do a gaming aspect like that would do, that could be a lot of fun. I think people would kind of gravitate. I think now would be the time to do it too, because of how hot and popular wrestling is right now.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there's definitely a space in the market. Let's say if it isn't even the raw mechanics, if you actually done something totally different, I think people now see, you've got wrestling now on a prominent stage at card shows where you could do sort of, gaming card nights. I know it's not the same, but things like Dungeons and Dragons and board games, they're all back in fashion now. There are lots of people doing tabletop games. And all that kind of stuff. So I think there's definitely a market there. It's just trying to find what audience you're going for. And you're looking for that more older sort of demographic ultimately to do these things rather than your teens. I think they're going to be not maybe invested in as with the mobile games, but I think there's definitely a market for it. It'd be more niche, but I definitely think there's a market out there.
And it depends on how the game is constructed too. Like, do you want to make it so it's only for the older crowd and that nostalgic type aspect, or do you want to make it because you want to attract the kids? And I would make it more trying to attract the kids too, though. And like if they had a game stuff like that, I have no problem. I would totally open my store to having like a game night and like a Raw Deal tournament here in the store.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
It's just to me, I think it's smart marketing having people come to your store who could potentially buy stuff, and you carry the product, they're going to buy it. But also, hell, I want to play.
Yeah, damn right. I mean, you need to sort of dust off his skills a little bit there, Tony.
I love to play. It's like that. I mean, I love Raw Deal. It brings back a lot of great memories for me, and maybe some point we can talk about the virtual format and what it's done.
Great too.
But the classic stuff. I mean, we've in a sense we've talked a lot about stuff, and I appreciate the format to be able to talk about it. But there's still so much more to talk about, even the classic Raw Deal stuff. Even going through the history of it and going how its evolution of how it changed from just a deck booster type stuff into having a backlash arsenal to having different types of mechanics and things like that. The game evolved for good, bad, or indifferent. It evolved, and it brings back a lot of memories, man. There's a lot of people I still talk to this day because that game brought people together. There's a whole community of that I was never part of. That was different than the trading card aspect of what I was so used to.
Yeah.
That I have now become friends with those people and been maintain those friendships. Hell, I got to the point where I was so involved in Raw Deal, I developed 85% of Revolution 4 virtual. I created most of that.
And that's the thing. And that's the thing, like, there's a passion for it. And I really wanted this session to really shine a bit of love on Raw Deal. I don't think it gets as much love as it deserves in kind of the modern hobby now. I think people are obviously taken away more with normal trading cards rather than the game cards. But there's such a depth of it there. And to understand the mechanics of it, it takes a skill in itself to pick up and play that in the first place. So I think today's kind of whet people's appetites. The door's always open to talk further with you. I want to talk about, again, like the virtual stuff for you at some point as well, and also tabletop sim on the PC that has Raw Deal within it as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it'd be good to kind of get into that. But let's park that for today. I'll let you get on and get the store open for the day. But feel free to plug as much as you want, Tony, obviously your YouTube channel, obviously your own store and all that kind of stuff. And I'll give you the floor for the next couple of minutes.
Oh, well, I'm, the owner of WrestlingTradingCards.com. That's the address. Most guys call it WTC, but all the social media pages can be found there on the main page, including the YouTube channel. Paul and Unn from the Price Guide and I will usually do our recaps. We now just started a new one called Hot Topic, where we just take certain topics here, kind of like what the old Worlds Collide podcast. When that kind of went away. So I'm kind of picking that back up again with Paul and I. There's a lot of new things to discuss, things that, in the past that have changed since the last time we had a discussion about it in the past. And the market's going to be changing a bit probably here with Fanatics doing everything coming in 2025. So we have a lot to discuss about that. So you can check out the channel there. And then for me in the store here, it's just the Wrestling Guy Store Phoenix. So it's basically the acronym is WGSPHX.com. You can just do a search for Arizona Wrestling Store. We're the only one in the state of Arizona, and having monthly signings. Still getting over the stress of running the day-to-day operations. We got meet and greets all the time. Next one coming up, we got Melina coming up here, part of our Toys for Tot drive, and then I haven't publicly announced it, but I guess I'm going to kind of do it right now. For January, we're going to have Jared the King Lawler in for our 2-year anniversary guest, and then. As I told you earlier, we're going to have a good guest for February as well. I think it's going to be a big one. And I've got March booked. And yeah, so we're doing well here. And I'm really excited about here connecting with the community. I've really made a name for ourselves here with both the independent scene and, the big promotions out here who are really into the wrestling scene here as well. So it's been really good out here. And a lot of work. And hopefully get your butt out here one day. You coming out for WrestleMania next year?
I'm not for WrestleMania, but I'm hoping to be in the National. It's in Chicago in July, so I'm hoping to try and tie in the National. So hopefully I'll see you at the National.
Well, yeah, I'd love to get you to the store sometime too.
No, 100%. Yeah, nice to come down and see you.
It's become
but
like.
again,
Go ahead.
No, I'll definitely, just for anyone who hasn't checked out your YouTube channel, do check out, as you mentioned, the Hot Topic. You and Paul went through rookie versus first appearance on the last episode as well. So, again, a real interesting conversation that numerous people have discussed and had their take on. So, if you want to get Tony and Paul's thoughts on that, definitely check out that video that was a few weeks ago.
The whole thing is always about engagement, too. I mean, we do what we do, like, especially, you're doing it, too. We do what we do because we have a love for the hobby as a whole. It's like that, and, guys like Paul and I have been doing it for decades, and it's just our way to try to help the community, understand things. And we're not right about everything. Obviously, we're not trying to be right about everything. We're just trying to help share our knowledge and give hopefully new collectors or people returning back to the hobby, a little bit of education, just like that, or a place to start to learn things. But we love the engagement. People have questions. Oh, no, that's not correct. This, that. Like, that's fine. We want to be able to make sure we have the information correctly. So I love when people, chime in and give their 2 cents on whatever subject we're talking about. So, and hopefully with this Raw Deal, I mean, I'm sure you guys out there, UK was a very strong market for Raw Deal for many, many years. Yeah. When I was doing Vela cards, UK was my number 2. Outside the United States, it was number 2 international sales place. Number 1 was Chile.
Oh, really?
Chile's by far number 1. Actually, I would put UK number 3. Actually, now I was thinking about Singapore was number 2.
And that's the thing, though. I think because we had we're digressing a little bit here, but I think because we had sort of a bit of a drought around wrestling cards, and Raw Deal was the only type of cards we could get for a certain period. So, doesn't surprise me at all, Tony.
Yeah. So, I love talking Raw Deal. So anytime you want to talk about it again, it's like that. And I mean, I sell it here in the store as well. What I have, not very much, but yeah, it's a good time for me. I had there's a lot of learning to do with that, and there's stories behind that too. But I enjoyed it. It became something I didn't think that I was going to really enjoy as much as I did being a player. And I was never a very good player, but I loved playing anyways. But it was originally a means for me to try to expand my inventory and sales, from selling cards. and I just thought, oh, it's cards. It's just a game. But I didn't think I was going to fall in love with it as much as I did.
I was saying it's been great talking to Tony. And then let's definitely book that in. Let's definitely talk some virtual raw deal and kind of get into some of the early sets in a bit more detail. A bit like we did with the Flair, go through a set in a bit more detail. It'd be great to sit down and do that with you next quarter.
You got it. I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate the time, and I look forward to the next one.
No, speak to you very soon. I say, as it's Wrestling Card Wednesday today, everybody, we'll do some Raw Deal with Wrestling Card Wednesday. So if you're on social media, do hashtag Wrestling Card Wednesday. Let's see some Raw Deal this afternoon.